Under a fractional reserve banking model, the banks are highly leveraged. When one deposits $10,000 into a savings account, the bank turns around and loans out $9,500 on construction projects, equipment loans, along with automobiles, motorcycles, and boats. Currently, they're paying us 1%, and they loan the money out at 6.5%, which means the banks are making a spread of 5.5%. The problem is the banks over the past 10 years have been loaning money to people who are living paycheck to paycheck. Let's see who's been prudent in their lending. I've moved my money from the big national banks to the local community banks. The following are considered by Weiss Ratings to be the safest in Georgia: Associated Credit Union, B-, Bank of Dawson, B+, CGR Credit Union, A-, Georgia United Credit Union, B+, Pelham Bank Company, A-, Robbins Federal Credit Union, A, West Central Georgia Bank, A+, Workman's Circle Inc. Credit Union, A-. Back during the height of the mania, there were no doc loans, no income verification loans, no asset verification loans, stated income loans, etc. We now know the misfortunes of this no underwriting era. A very good friend of mine has been in the banking business just shy of 20 years, who earned an MBA from Georgia State University, and he told me 2 years ago the FDIC came in and instructed the small community banks to foreclose on what they needed to foreclose on, write down what needed to be written down, and clean up their balance sheets, which has taken place. However, the big banks in the latter part of 2011 have just now started unloading their shadow inventory. Unfortunately, there's another wave to the downside in real estate. However, the big national banks are yet to unload their shadow inventory. Unfortunately, there's another wave to the downside in real estate. The Federal Reserve, along with the banks, now realize they have loaned money on assets that are declining in value. This does not bode well for the future of banking nor real estate. Approximately 2 years ago, Bloomberg sent a Freedom of Information Act request to the Federal Reserve asking for the details of their activities back during the crisis. The Fed declined releasing the information and claimed it would be detrimental to the companies involved. Bloomberg filed suit, which ultimately ended up in the Supreme Court. The court ruled in favor of Bloomberg, and the amount involved was a shocking $7.77 trillion. In a Bloomberg article published November 27, 2011, the amount of money the central bank parceled out was surprising even to Gary Stern, president of the Federal Reserve Bank of Minneapolis from 1985 to 2009, who says he wasn't aware of the magnitude. It dwarfed the Treasury Department's better-known $700 billion Troubled Asset Relief Program, or TARP. Add up all guarantees and lending limits, the Federal Reserve had committed $7.77 trillion as of March 2009 to rescuing the financial system, more than half the value of everything produced in the United States that year. However, according to the Government Accountability Office, the GAO, the total loaned amount was $16.1 trillion. Prior to the Federal Reserve printing money, the Treasury is supposed to auction bonds, and then and only then is it printed. In this case, that did not take place. The Federal Reserve simply wired digits from their accounts to the institution and foreign governments in need. In 1999, Ben Bernanke said the U.S. government has a technology called a printing press that allows it to produce as many dollars as it wishes at no cost. And as you've just seen, it will do that very thing. When the history books are written, the Alan Greenspan and Ben Bernanke era will go down as the most reckless in monetary history. I realize the thought might cross your mind that everything is fine now and there are nothing but blue skies ahead. Normalcy bias is defined as disbelieving one's situation when faced with grave and imminent danger and/or catastrophe. One tends to focus on the actual phenomenon instead of taking evasive action and enters a state of paralysis. Back in 1980, I recall walking through the family room and Walter Cronkite was going to a commercial break, and the scene changed to Times Square. And I asked my father, "What's that?" As he peered around the sports page, he said, "That's the debt clock." "The debt clock?" I asked. "Yes, Washington has spent more money than they've collected in taxes, and as a result, America is in debt." I thought to myself, debt. How can this great nation be in debt? At this time, the national debt only stood at $909 billion. Back then, interest rates were approaching 16%, and we were still the creditor nation of the world. What about now? Now we're the debtor nation of the world. In fact, we're the greatest debtor nation in the history of the world. What's going to happen when the hedge funds realize America is in worse shape than Europe? In response, the Federal Reserve should raise interest rates in order to send a message of confidence to the markets. But if they do, the cost to service the debt for individuals, municipalities, counties, state, and the national government could cause a deflationary collapse. In turn, the Federal Reserve can only do one thing, that is keep printing and trying to paper over each crisis as they arise. Back in 2008, it was the corporations that were insolvent, and the central banks around the globe came running to the rescue. Now it's the central bank's solvency that has come into question. The normalcy bias leads us to believe that everything is going to be fine and that life will continue the way it always has. But the words of Maynard Keynes, father of Keynesianism and proponent of fractional reserve banking, says, Lenin is said to have declared the best way to destroy the capitalist system was to debauch the currency. By a continuing process of inflation, governments can confiscate, secretly and unobserved, an important part of the wealth of their citizens. By this method, they not only confiscate, but they confiscate arbitrarily. And while the process impoverishes many, it actually enriches some. As the inflation proceeds and the real value of the currency fluctuates widely and from month to month, all permanent relations between debtors and creditors, which forms the ultimate foundation of capitalism, becomes so utterly distorted as to almost meaningless. And the process of the wealth-getting degenerates into a gamble of the lottery. He goes on to say, Lenin was right. There is no subtler, no surer means of overturning the existing basis of a society than to debauch the currency. The process engages all the hidden forces of economic law on the side of destruction, and it does it in a manner in which not one man in a million is able to diagnose.